everyone. My name is LaChina Robinson, and we are so excited to have you with us today. The theme of this year's PlaymakeHER, presented by Chase event, is centered around the women's sports movement, both in the arena of play and beyond. The women we will hear from today are athletes, former athletes, published authors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders. We're going to start with a conversation with Crystal Dunn of the U.S. Women's Soccer Team. Hey, Crystal, welcome. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, let's start by sharing your experiences as an athlete. And I'm going to try not to run out of breath as I'm reading some of these accomplishments, but you have won almost every individual and team accolade in your sport, from New York Gatorade Player of the Year as a high school student to the 2012 NCAA title with North Carolina in college. I went to Wake Forest. I'm going to forgive you for being a Tar Heel, but go ACC. You also won the NWSL MVP in 2015. Amazing. And of course, World Cup in 2019. Give us some insight into your dedication to the game and how this journey started for you back home in Rockville Center, New York, but I believe it actually started in Queens, correct?
Yes. My whole family is from the city, Queens, New York. We moved out to Long Island when I was about 2 or 3 years old. And that's really where I was, made aware of this sport, soccer. My parents didn't grow up with this sport. They grew up playing a sport called handball. And I'm like, that is not even a sport where you hit the ball up against the wall with your hand. But that was really where I had access to soccer. And I think, falling in love with a sport that I knew nothing about was really incredible at the time because, I had no expectations. For me, it was just having fun, being a kid, running around and sharing those moments with my friends at that time. And then fast forward, obviously, to where I am today, I look back and I'm like, I never knew this sport was going to open the doors that it did for me. It paid for my education. It allowed me to say that I became a professional in this sport. And it's just been an incredible journey.
You use the word access, which right away gets my wheels turning, right? Access to soccer. Like I remember, as I was coming up, I did not see the sport of soccer really at all. My high school didn't have a volleyball team. So when I got to college and, there was volleyball and everyone said, well, didn't you play volleyball too? Didn't have access to that. Soccer is not a very diverse sport, and you're one of the only Black women on the national team. And as we know, access to sport is oftentimes linked to race and socioeconomic status. How has the theme of being the only Black woman on your team played out in your career?
Well, honestly, my story is very similar to many that I speak with today. A lot of the Black athletes that play in the NWSL, they said the same thing. I was the only Black girl on my team growing up. So once I knew our stories aligned and we have a lot of shared experiences, I knew that there was a problem at the grassroots level as to why Black kids are not able to see this sport and have access to the sport. And then after I did some digging, I realized, soccer is a universal sport. It is played across the world. It should be considered everyone's game. But yet in the US, there is this structure called the pay-to-play model, which basically makes it so that if you are not from the suburbs or you come from a little bit of money, you are not able to really play this sport. Parents are not going to be dishing out $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year for their child to play youth sports. I mean, it's so expensive for your kid to even enjoy and have fun playing a game that should be made, free for everybody to be involved in and inclusive for everybody. So yes, the sport has posed a lot of problems for minorities to be involved and have access to the sport. And for me, through my career, I've always known that I want to be bigger than just being an athlete. I want to be able to give back to the communities and really help at the grassroots level, give kids access to the sport because it is such a fun and incredible sport. But before people not have access to it, it just breaks my heart.
You bring up a great point, right? That, some people think all they have to worry about when it comes to getting their kids involved in sport is, can my child make the team, right? But in other communities, the reason why they don't have soccer, yes, it's the cost of it. It's, do we have space in my community for a soccer field, right? Like, especially in a lot of inner city areas, it's like, where are we going to put where are we going to have the space for soccer? It also boils down to a lot of Black and brown girls having to be the #1 caretaker in their homes. And so they don't have the time, the resources, anyone to bring them back and forth to practice and participate in sport. I remember in my AAU experience that my teammates' parents had to chip in a little bit for me to participate. I mean, that was a reality for me, and getting rides back and forth to practice because my mom just couldn't do it. And I think it's great for us to continue to have these conversations so that other young girls do have options. When you look at the number in terms of sports like lacrosse, golf, soccer, where pay to play, a lot of young brown and Black girls don't have the money to do that. Do you remember the first moment that you realized, hey, I am the only Black girl on my team, or there aren't very many girls that look like me, and what that experience felt like for you?
Yeah, I mean, my parents moved me out to Long Island, a town called Rockville Center. It is a predominantly white neighborhood. So from a young age, I realized I'm the only one in my classrooms. I'm the only one playing this sport. It was pretty lonely, but I think because that happened to me at such a young age, I kind of found a way to feel comfortable in it. I had amazing parents who always taught me, don't let anybody make you feel less than. Even if you're the only Black girl there, you belong. There is a space for you to be in this sport. So I just had really supportive parents that, instilled this confidence in me at a young age, because, being the only one, being the only minority on a team could be really, really lonely, and, can stress you out in so many ways that a young kid should not be stressed out. And yeah, I just think, I was 14 when I had my first Black teammate to play alongside with. And me and her are still best friends till this day. And we just always share stories on what it was like to kind of look across the field and be like, there's another one. Like, yes, you look like me. We can talk about all the things that I can never talk about with my white teammates, hair. Oh my God. Oh, what, the style of hair that you're wearing today looks good. Oh, can you finish my braids up? Things like that I was like, I would have to go home to my mom and talk to her about, because that was the only relief that I had. So, my story, like I shared before, is very similar to many that I play soccer with with today. And I feel like, we have to do better. We have to create a more diverse sport, and we're going to need everybody to really help in that change.
Yeah, I mean, it really takes a village. And while we're talking about just sport in this moment, the reality is Black women oftentimes feel like the only one in business, in many of the boardrooms they walk into, in so many situations. If you were giving advice to someone watching this that wants to know how they can help in the space of diversity, whether it's giving more girls opportunity and exposure to soccer, or ensuring that you are not the only Black face or one of the few when it comes to the world stage of our women's soccer team, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think, a lot of it comes down to branding and marketing, and really shifting this narrative that Black women don't belong in this sport, or Black people don't play soccer. I think marketing and sponsorships have a huge responsibility to promote Black women in this sport. I think for me, after 2019, I changed agencies and really wanted to work with someone who was going to push Black women and Black faces out there in this sport, because too many times when young kids look at their idols, it's only white people that they see playing the sport. And that, can really diminish someone's dreams of wanting to play the sport. If you are a young minority girl, you're going to look up and say, no Black people play this sport. So therefore, I don't know if I want to play soccer. And I think sponsorships and brands have a huge responsibility to really advocate for Black women and Black athletes in general, and really posterize us and put us, on billboards, in commercials, so that young kids can see that, Black women, Black men are in these sports, and there is a space for them should they want to pursue their dreams.
That visibility is so important, right? Like, that representation is so important. And again, even as you broaden that scope outside of sport, if you're in a business meeting and you look around the room and you don't see anyone with Black or brown skin, ask questions. You know, if you are a true ally to someone and you want to bring them to the table, or you think they're deserving of an opportunity and maybe been overlooked, speak their names. We all have, I think, the responsibility, whether it's in our communities, our churches, whatever groups you're a part of, our friend circle at work, to take a look around.
Mm-hmm.
If there are no women, if there are not people of color in those spaces, ask questions and then build your own diversity up enough that you can bring others to the table. That's, in my opinion, truly being an ally. The NWSL has recently formed the Black Players Coalition. Why was that so necessary?
Oh man, it was so necessary and a long time coming. I think with all the events that transpired last year, you know, the Black women in the NWSL really got together and said, we need a group where we can just vent, we can talk to, we can lean on each other, we can discuss issues that happen in society that we don't feel comfortable discussing in our markets, because there's only probably 1 or 2 Black players per team in the league. And it is very overwhelming when events like that happened last year take place and you look around and you say, there's no one to really speak to freely about these events. So our group kind of formed initially to be a support group for each other. And then we turned into a nonprofit, which, you know, we're so really proud about, because now we have this momentum to really tackle our initiatives, which is giving access to young minority kids and, you know, really elevating the image and the representation of Black women as athletes, but also leaders across all industries.
What did that take? What did it take, Crystal, to get that kind of buy-in to actually make that happen?
A lot of conversations, you know, a lot of people just really stepping outside themselves. And as athletes, it's so easy to just be like, you know, I want to play my sport. I want to go home. I want to get my paycheck and I want to, you know, just do what I need to do. But I think after a year like last year, we all realized, no, we can't just be athletes. We can't just show up to work and go home. We have a responsibility to make sure that, you know, we're leaving this game in a better place than when we found it. And it's going to take hard work. I'm a professional athlete. I am, you know, now learning to be a businesswoman, but, you know, we're not experts in a lot of these things, but now it's our job to really seek help and understand that it's not only on us, it's on everybody to want to be involved. And now it's an incredible feeling to reach out to allies who want to be involved. And even if they're not Black, we need white allies. We need everybody to want to take part in this change, because, you know, racism and systemic racism doesn't just fall on the Black community. It affects everybody. And if you're not outraged or just as outraged about the events that took place last year, then, you know, you're part of the problem.
Yes. Thank you for saying that, because I think there were so many people when things started happening last year that felt like they had to pick sides. And there are no sides when it comes to human and civil rights. There are no sides, right? Like, everyone should have civil rights and everyone should have human rights. It's not about politics. It's about, do you believe in equal and fair treatment? And to your point, and I'm curious, I know we talked a little bit about this, but if there is someone listening you mentioned how important it is for our white men and women to be allies. If there's someone listening that wants to be a better ally to their colleague, to their teammate, what are some things that you would suggest they do?
Well, I would suggest that they start out by just, you know, simply asking questions, asking how they can help and get involved, and not just, you know, asking a question one week and not following up, but really staying committed. Because I think what we're experiencing is some people want to be part of the trend. You know, last year was tweet and post the Black square, right? And then it's kind of like those same people posting those squares. It's like, well, where are you? I haven't heard from you since then. So I just think you really have to show commitment, and you have to follow up and engage and actually ask the right questions on how you can help, and not just be there for the trend, but be there for the long haul, because that's what it is. You know, racism isn't going away tomorrow. I wish it were, but at the end of the day, we know that this is going to take time, and it is about restructuring a community and restructuring a system that was set up to really oppress a group of people. And that's not going to go away overnight. So you have to be in it for the long haul and not just be here for the trend.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very, 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 very well said. And there is a difference between diversity and inclusion as well, right? Don't just have diverse faces in the room Include them. Include them. Well, thank you for all the work you're doing, because you are changing what a little Black girl's experience may be like along the way. If she loves soccer, if she wants to get involved in the sport, or maybe she doesn't know about it. Like, you are literally changing the trajectory of opportunities for her. We thank you for that. Let's talk about being uncomfortable and vulnerable. Okay, it's well documented that you had to make a position change ahead of the World Cup, going from your comfort zone to outside of it. From what I understand, and again, not a big soccer, but offense to defense, right?
Yes. Yes.
How did you rebuild your own confidence in this new position?
Oh man, I am still building confidence in new positions, because it is something that, you know, you have to embrace it. You know, for me, I always looked around and said, you know, why does this player get to play only in the attack? Why do they get to only score goals and assists and be an attacking player, where I have to do that and then be pulled where I want to play and then play in a different position? Like, you know, the more I was asking why me, I wasn't embracing, you know, the unique qualities that I do possess by being able to be this two-way player. And so I think leading into the World Cup, you know, I was nervous. It's a huge platform. It's the pinnacle of soccer, is playing in a World Cup. And I'm playing outside back, knowing that I have to mark the top, you know, front line of all the other teams that we're competing up against. And, you know, nerves started kicking in. But I think once the whistle blew and the tournament began, I just realized no matter where I am on the field, it's the same sport. You're playing the same game, whether I'm in the attack, whether I'm in the back line. At the end of the day, it's soccer. So for me, I just simplified the game. I just, you know, embraced who I was as a player. I understood that this role could not fall on anybody else's shoulders but mine. And once I turned, you know, what made me nervous into an actual superpower, I was like, oh, I'm flying. So it really was about embracing just who I was, and embracing the role that was placed upon me, and just enjoying it, you know, and staying in the moment and living in that moment, and not getting too far ahead of myself.
When I read that you had to make that kind of change, let me tell you, I was like, she did what? Like, I was a center on the basketball court. If you would ask me to be a point guard, no way we're winning anything. I mean, we can't even, listen, you'll be blowing the whistle every day at practice. Like, that's not natural to me. I'm an analyst on television. If you ask me to be a play-by-play, again, it could be a disaster. And I'm not even on your level anywhere close in anything I've ever done in life. But to make that kind of change and to be as amazing as you have been is just phenomenal. And you spoke a little bit about, you know, your self-confidence and making sure that you were ready for the challenge. But how did you gain the trust of the people around you in this role that you hadn't been in?
Yeah, I mean, I have, you know, part of the reason why I love team sports is that it's not just you on the field. You know, there's so many plays that, yeah, you can impact a play, but there's 11 players, 11 teammates of yours on the field where you can lean on other people. You know, if you're having an off moment, an off game, you can look to the left and the right and say, you know, I need you to cover for me. I need you to help me out here. So I had incredible teammates who I really leaned on at the time, and really, you know, felt vulnerable at the time to tell them, hey, I need a little bit of help. I'm new in this position. I need your support. And even though it was uncomfortable, at the end of the day, it made me stronger. It made my bond with my teammates that much stronger, where we can trust each other and feel and be vulnerable with each other, because it's not easy. It's not easy to say and admit that you need a bit of help and you need assistance in any way. And I think, you know, my teammates were so incredible in that moment, and they, you know, really allowed me to be me, and they trusted that I was going to get the job done. And that's all it took, was them telling me that they believe that I can achieve all the things that I need to achieve.
Wow. Yeah, that's why I always have to ask myself, like, could I have played like tennis or golf or more individual sports? Like,
you get all the glory, but it's like, if you lose a game, it's like, that's on you. There, you can't even.
It is square on my shoulders. Like, I can't tell you the number of times I was able to say, "Oh, coach, she didn't get help. Like, I know I missed my assignment, but she was supposed to pick me up and have my back." If I didn't have it, and that's why I look at Serena Williams and I'm like, the mental toughness that it takes to be that. I mean, there's nowhere else to go, right? It's you. and that's it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I definitely landed in the right place playing the team sport because
Yes.
I don't know if I've got it. So the women's team is popular, right? And it's hard to argue against that. The exposure, fandom are abundant, especially around the World Cup and Olympics. Mm-hmm. How do we close the gap to match that same fandom and energy every year around the NWSL?
Oh man, we ask this question basically every single year. I mean, the women's national team is the most dominant team in the world. We win World Cups back to back. We win Olympics. I mean, the success is there. So you would think that the buzz and the hype around our women's national team should trickle into the domestic league that we play in, the NWSL. I still think soccer, unfortunately, is fairly new as a sport as a whole in the U.S. I mean, we have to compete with football, basketball, baseball, all these other sports are ahead of us, and rightfully so. They've been in existence for so long. I mean, women's soccer right now competing with the NFL. I mean, we are on two different spectrums right now. But I do think we're growing, and I think what's gonna help is awareness, people understanding that there is a domestic league here. Get out, go to the stadiums, go to the games. And just us being on TV, I think, is a huge thing. We have yet to ever have a multi-year deal with an ESPN, a Fox, or whatever broadcasting network we can get our hands on. And I think that is really going to allow people to see the game. And even if you can't make it to the stadiums, you're going to be watching it on TV. You're going to understand that this sport is played here. Women can play the sport and just, be a fan, get engaged. So I think the broadcasting situation is what's holding us back. And if we can secure a 3-year, multi-year deal, that'll be really helpful for us.
I mean, you've nailed it on several occasions. The sponsorship dollars, the visibility, like it's all tied in. It seems like to changing people's minds about what they may perceive when it comes to women's sports. I mean, I'm sure you're in social media. Half of these guys that are like, oh, no one's watching women's sports. And I say guys because 95% of the time when we get those comments,
yes.
It's them. And they've never even watched it. They've never seen it. They've never given it an opportunity. And there's so much inspiration to be had. And, we can talk about the little girls and them watching sport and it changing what they feel like they can be as athletes. Well, if some of these fans would watch women's sports, it would change the perception of what they may think it is. And to your point, I mean, a lot of these women's leagues, WNBA, NWSL, have not even been around that long. So we still have people that don't understand the impact of Title IX, right? We're going back to the mid-70s and we're still saying, hello, women are playing sports. It's just crazy that we're still having those conversations, right?
Yes, definitely. The visibility needs to be there. I mean, we need multi-year deals where people can rely on the seasons being broadcasted every single week, like the NBA, like NFL. It's just, that's what it's going to take for people to be able to, visually see the sport being played. And again, just get out of your bias of women can't play sports, women, what, all that needs to go away and the narrative needs to change. And I think us being able to be seen on TV will help that.
And I would suggest that we go back to the old model. What comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? People say, well, we don't want to invest in women's sports because no one's watching, no one's paying attention. You invest in it and watch the people come. You got to give it the marketing. You got to give it the opportunity, the visibility, all of that, and then come back after you've matched those dollars. Then come back after we've had some time and say, oh, okay, well, people didn't show up. But I guarantee that will not be the case.
Exactly.
Crystal, it has been fantastic to visit with you. I guess my last question is just, what is on your mind these days? And it could be as a female athlete, it could be as a woman, it could be as a Black woman. What is the one thing that you would want people that are listening today to know that's on Crystal's mind?
Oh man, a lot of things actually, but I'll narrow it down to one thing. But I think for me, my biggest mission is really, changing this sport for everybody. And mostly young Black girls, because I do think sports is a microcosm of society. And I feel like if we can change the environment that we're in, even 1%, 2%, that is going to trickle into society, you know? So, you know, as much as we all want to achieve a lot of things, you know, I want to solve world hunger, I want to do all these things. At the end of the day, if we can just impact the environment that we are a part of, that is just going to spread its wings and really reach and touch so many different areas. And I just, you know, that's my challenge to everybody, is just affect and impact the environment that you're a part of, and just, you know, watch it trickle out and spread its wings.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful to see what you've done. And if everyone just took their individual experience and where they are or whatever resource they have and put it towards making a difference in our world, just how much further along we would be. And if you can see her, you can be her. And a lot of young girls want to be Crystal Dunn. And so give them that opportunity to do that by investing in women's sports and to phenomenal athletes like Crystal. Crystal, it has been so awesome to spend this time with you. Thank you to everyone for joining our opening conversation for PlaymakeHER. So many more to come. You are going to be blown away by the women that you will see today. And thank you again to Crystal for being so transparent and vulnerable with us all today. These conversations are very important for us to have and to hear. And there is a need to have these talks and to ensure that the success for women in sports and Black women's sports is moving forward, that it's gaining momentum, that we're moving the needle. And so we hope that gaining this perspective today, our viewers are walking away with a new perspective, a new idea, and you return to your homes, your work, wherever you are, and think about how you can help and what can you do to bring more Crystal Dunns into the world. With that, I will turn it over to my friend and colleague at ESPN, Doris Burke, who opened the doors for me. You talk about see her, be her. That's what Doris has done for me in my career. So she is the GOAT. Welcome, Doris Burke, for our next conversation.
LaChina, thank you so very much for getting us off to such a wonderful start with the PlaymakeHER presented by Chase. Thank you to you and to Crystal for incredible insights. I'm so glad you mentioned that we are not only colleagues, but friends. And in the aftermath of what happened last year, I have tried very hard to educate myself, and that conversation just furthered that education. So thank you so much to both of you. We have an extraordinary group here prepared to try to extend the conversation. I am delighted to be the moderator for such a distinguished panel. So if you'll help me to welcome these incredible women, I'm going to start with Ibtihaj Muhammad, who is an entrepreneur, an activist, speaker, author, Olympic medalist in fencing. She has been named to Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential list, and she is an incredibly important figure in the larger global discussion and equality and importance of sports in society. Ibtihaj, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me. So honored.
Hilary Knight, Olympic gold medalist, 8-time world champion, and arguably, I'm going to throw out arguably, she's simply the best female hockey player in the world. She has been an outspoken advocate for gender equality and is changing the landscape for women in sports. So Hilary, please welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Sorry, I'm calling in from the rink.
No, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. This next woman I know is Jayne Appel. I had the incredible pleasure of covering her just unbelievable Stanford women's basketball teams for the great Tara Vanderveer. She has spent 7 seasons playing for the San Antonio Stars. She is now currently the Director of Player Relations for the WNBA's Player Association, a Berkeley native and somebody doing just absolutely incredible work, probably maybe more important now than ever. She passionately develops and implements player programming with mental health advocacy in mind. Jayne, it's been a long time. Last time I saw you were in a Stanford uniform and a WNBA uniform. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me, and go Card. Head to the final.
That's right. That's right. The advancement to the Final Four. And there is my girl. I was worried Chiney Ogwumike was going to be a little bit late for this. But Chiney, also a Stanford Cardinal, two-time All-Star power forward for the Los Angeles Sparks, a colleague and a friend of mine as well. The first Black woman, the first WNBA player to host a national ESPN radio program. Go ahead with your bad self, Chiney Ogwumike. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Wow, this is like a whole family Zoom. I got my girl Jayne, I got the GOAT Doris, I got my sis Hilary. I be gassing Ibtihaj all the way up on social media, my favorite social media family. So I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
You guys, I want to start with a general question for all of you, and I'll probably, put one of you on the spot to start it, but I'm going to begin with the name of the panel because we've named this the asterisk. And the reason we did that is because we as women, we compete, and we compete hard, and we break records, we win titles. Increasingly, you are seeing us win the ratings victories in various sports on television. But I would say that sometimes it feels like for every win, for every milestone, every point scored, there always seems to be this, but it's women's sports. There's, that asterisk sitting out there. And Chiney, I'll begin with you. How do you see that manifest itself? And how do you react to it when it happens?
So first and foremost, when it happens, I think that that person that might be projecting those type of assumptions or beliefs may just not be educated to where we are with women's sports and just the game period. Because I think the number one thing is, as women, we are often in spaces that are not built for us, right? Like whether it's women's sports or women in industries, and we are usually probably the only one there, or there's a very few amount of us. And so our voices, our visibility is not at the forefront. But I think a lot of people confuse that with validity for why we are there, or our value and our voice. And we operate in a world where we're constantly compared, right? I think in women's basketball, we have that assumption a lot where it's, oh, you're a women's player and that's good for X, Y, or Z, not just acknowledging the value and the validity of what we are witnessing and seeing. And so as I sort of have navigated the spaces, I think at first, like, we all have that visceral response of like, oh, like, so annoying, like, you don't get it, all that type of stuff. But now I think we're at a point where we're educating ourselves. And I think this really started in 2020 to so many different facets of life, whether it is race, gender, fluidity, all that type of stuff. It's changing the way we celebrate people in real time. And I think a great example of this is what we're seeing right now. Like, the women's tournament is it in March Madness. It's where the excitement is, the best players are. We just got an announcement that Paige Beckers is AP Player of the Year. First time that a freshman has won that award. And so the game has always been there. And I think that's one thing that I know from Jayne, who was at Stanford before me. Like, the game has always been great. It's just now the tide's turning where no longer are people just settling for that assumption. They're being educated, or at least being reminded, or now they're seeing it. Like, games are going on ABC. Games are getting the right treatment. SportsCenter is leading with women. Once that changes, as we've been seeing the last few weeks, the last few months, all that type of stuff, I think everything else, like the standard of what the business is or where the game's growth is now being met to what we know the standard is on the court, which has always been A1. And I guess I'll kick it to Jayne, because I know Jayne, like, our journeys have been tied together, but like, as a member, like someone has helped us in the union fight those battles outside of the court, it's been interesting as well.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, I think it really ties into the education and educating everyone else who's watching, who form these opinions, kind of how before watching and actually participating in the sport, I guess. But you saw this past summer that WNBA ratings increased when you saw a lot of the male professional sports decrease. And I think it was just because there was more opportunity for it to be on TV. Everyone's at home and they're like, oh, well, we've got this space, let's put on W games. And when the opportunity was there for people to watch, they tuned in and increased all of our viewership numbers. So it kind of puts pressure, you know, on all the networks and everyone who covers women's basketball and women's sports to put us on and see what actually happens.
Ibtihaj and Hilary, I would say that for those of us involved with women's basketball, we feel blessed to a certain extent that, you know, ESPN has made that commitment, so to speak. I guess I'll begin with you, Hilary, and then Ibtihaj, please, I want to hear your sentiments as well about this. Hockey is a different sport. It is put in the spotlight, Hilary, you know, when the Olympics roll around every 4 years. Again, I go back to that asterisk and your battle as you try to navigate your world in hockey.
Yeah, in many ways, I think we're, you know, decades behind basketball and soccer and many other sports. But in other ways, you know, as we've seen recently, the validity and the value of what we're doing, and as these women spoke about before, isn't equated to our platform, right? We've never had a platform. So we've got an amazing level of skill and talent, and we know we're ready. We just need the platform. So right now, we've done a lot of work to try and create these opportunities, build the opportunities, and create value in other spaces to reflect more attention and visibility in what we're doing on the women's side of the sport. But really exciting things to come. But as you said, I mean, there's still an asterisk with everything. So it's continuing to fight the misnomers of everything and, you know, build a better future for the next generation.
Ibtihaj. I think you might still be on mute. Can anyone else hear her?
Sorry, I hate to be that person. Chine, don't do that.
I don't. Like, come on, girl.
I hate to be that person. I apologize. You know, I'm no stranger to adversity. I know what it's like to be, you know, in the fight. And what I love about this moment, like if the last year has taught us anything, it's how we show up for ourselves. Like the WNBA really showed all of us what it means to not only fight for your own rights, but also the rights of others. And I love that ESPN, NBC has committed their platforms to showing more games, not just women's basketball, but even this summer, I look forward to the Olympic Games and us hopefully seeing a lot of sports that normally don't get any screen time. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm the only one on this call who has seen a fencing match internationally in person, right? But what the great thing is about the Olympics is that it gives an eye to sports that normally people don't see. And that means you're going to have more kids who are going to, you know, talk to their parents, talk to, you know, their guardians, and try to seek out those sports. That's creating, you know, buzz around sports, and hopefully, you know, a sport like mine, like fencing, or even for someone like Hilary in hockey, more involvement means more screen time in the long run. I know we're far behind women's basketball, but we're getting there.
Well, I just want to follow up with you because of the very first sentiment you expressed there. No stranger to adversity. You are in an unusual sport. So if you would share some of your journey and some of the things that have stood out, maybe moments that are quite memorable, and then just how do you get through challenges when you're staring them in the face?
Well, I am a fencer by trade. I started fencing at 12 years old. When I was a kid, I was just looking for a sport to hopefully get me into a good college. I didn't know that after I graduated from Duke that I would become a professional athlete. I had no idea. But when I looked at Team USA, honestly, it wasn't diverse enough for me. I felt like there needed to be more representation. I'm the first woman of color on the U.S. women's saber team, the first Muslim woman to win an Olympic medal. And to be honest, I was really shocked when these things happened back in 2016. But what I love about that moment is that hopefully it creates opportunity for more people, especially those who have faced similar challenges that I faced. And if sport has done anything for me, it's taught me what resilience looks like. You know, we all know what it's like to lose. We all know what hard work looks like. And
No matter what happens, you always have the opportunity to get up and fight another day. And I feel like I've learned that resilience through sport.
I think it's a great point. I mean, regardless of gender, sports, I think, have taught us probably the most important lessons in our lives. Losing is part of life, right? And adversity, failure, it's all inherent to humanity. Jayne, I'm curious about your work as it relates to mental health, because we have seen athletes now be willing to share some of their vulnerabilities. Life is not easy. Challenges will come no matter what. I'm just curious, what inspired you to do that? What progress are you making? And just share, if you would, a little bit of your journey with that.
Sure. I guess how I was exposed to mental health was I had a family member who was a diagnosed schizophrenic. And growing up, it was something that was very private, and it's hard to deal with as a little kid when you don't have your friends to turn to and you're different. It drove me to study psychology at Stanford, and I think the biggest lesson I learned at Stanford was that one of the biggest hurdles with mental health is the label mental health, and that it's not seen as a physical issue, even though it is. It's in the brain. And becoming a professional athlete, then I wanted to use my platform to kind of drive those stigmas away that are attached to mental health, change the narrative, hosted the first WNBA and actually the first NBA mental health awareness night as well as a part of my rookie year. And now trying to kind of not being physically on the court, but still supporting the players, continuing to encourage them to speak out and use their platform to kind of normalize mental health and make it a topic that is talked about and that more resources are put into. And I think especially in a time like right now in the middle of a pandemic and everyone being even more isolated at home, it's just going to continue to matter more and more. And the more athletes and people on these platforms that can speak out and make it a normal conversation, helping to build the resources towards it will only benefit everyone.
Yeah, I thought it was so evident. The WNBA players, appropriately so, got a ton of recognition for their commitment to the Black Lives Matter movement. But one of the things that struck me about what those women were experiencing there was the pain of having to witness what they witnessed societally. And so, that too takes its toll. And Hilary, I'm just going to turn to you because, a different sport. But when you see WNBA players make the stand that they do you feel a responsibility? And Ibtihaj, I'm going to put this to you as well. Do you guys feel a responsibility with your respective platforms to sort of, join that sort of momentum that those women created? And if you do, how do you exert that influence?
Absolutely. What the WNBA players did was outstanding, an inspiration for everybody. And I mean, it's one thing to watch, and then it's also another thing to say, okay, how do we go about supporting them as well, and maybe in different ways, right? And how do we also take a moment to reflect and figure out, okay, hockey is not the most diverse sport. It's not the most accessible. And what are we going to do looking internally to try and fix that moving forward and to make hockey more inclusive for many people? What the players have done, it's incredible what they continue to do. But it was awesome because we had to turn internally within our organizations and set up educational sessions and things like that to make sure that, we're not just out there posting about it. We're actually walking the talk and doing the work to be better in our spaces and continue to lend a hand when we can.
We just heard that from Crystal in the prior panel, actually, how rare it was as a child to be a Black little girl on a soccer team where you're the only one and just trying to figure out the hair and all those things. So Ibtihaj, you are in such an unusual sport for most Americans. You're right. Our exposure to it is Olympics based. And you mentioned, that you are unique in your own right in your respective sport, the first this, the first that.
Mm-hmm.
How much responsibility is there with that? How much weight or pressure do you feel relative to that? And how do you navigate it?
So when I look at the WNBA and their movement, right, and this, what I see as this kind of snowball that they started and got moving, right? To me, it's because it came from an organization that's predominantly Black women. So we know what it's like to be in this fight for our lives, to be a part of this movement, because for us, it's not temporary. It's not because it's trending. This is a lifelong marathon that we've all been a part of since birth, right? And even though, you know, I was not out there on the court with the Sparks, I was not out there playing, I didn't necessarily have on a shirt, I feel like in my own personal life, on my own social channels, this is not performative. This is very much so who I am. I feel like I speak to these things because they sit very close to my heart. Watching, you know, George Floyd take his last breaths on social media with everyone. I mean, when I tell you that it brought me to tears, because I realized that that could have been me. You know, I realized that that could have been my brother, my father, anyone Black that I know, to be completely honest. So this isn't something that we're new to. Like, if we look historically at the Black community, we know how to mobilize, we know how to protest, we know how to create these moments and these social justice movements, and we're always in the front of those movements. But do I feel pressure? I don't know if I would call it that. I feel like as Black athletes, we carry a lot with us every single day, especially when we compete. Because as Black athletes, we're expected to be, it's like you have to be exceptional in order to be accepted. You know, that was my experience in sport. No one thought anything about the little Black girl in the fencing uniform. It was more so when I started to get really good and climb world rankings that it was, it was intriguing for people. But I know what it feels like to carry this weight around. And I'm most excited that it's not just us in this fight. I feel like that's what encourages me, and that's what keeps me going. Even though we've lost so many people, especially in this last year, to police brutality and police violence, I'm happy that there's other people who feel just as passionately about this as we do as African Americans.
You triggered a thought in my head. I had recently read a study where it suggested deeply that Black women aspired to positions of leadership more than any other demographic on the distaff side specifically. And I couldn't help but think, I am sure it's because of the obstacles they've had to overcome and understanding how they would get there. And I just have to say this, 2020 was the year of the Black woman. What Stacey Abrams did in Atlanta, and I can't say this enough, Madam Vice President, like, amen. So,
and they're both my cousins. So this is.
Well, if they're your cousins, they're my cousins too.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Seriously, I could cry when I think about how those two women have affected change in this country. It's inspiring to me, and it is appropriate that the first woman to do it is a Black woman. So I'm just, forgive me for getting off on that tangent. So I want to put something to you, and you all are, much younger than me, but I'm curious because you all occupy spaces. Hilary, I'm sure you've played hockey against guys at some point. All of us have encountered various things as women. Have you ever felt either subtle or overt exceptions to your presence? And if you, like, what are you doing here, essentially? And Shanae, you talk sports for a living, so I'm going to begin again with you, and then Jayne, please follow. If you've heard those things, is it subtle? Is it overt? Is it both of those things? And again, I would ask you, what do you do? What is your response when you encounter it?
Well, I would just say this, Doris. It's kind of subtle for me, but I know it was overt for you. As a trailblazer, like knowing what you have been through, I'm like, yo, like she has, and I'm saying she, but it's overall because you to go, like you're an icon status. So let's just be real here, mentor and everything. But like, I look at you, I look at on the basketball court, Lisa Leslie, I look at the women that have paved the way. So I know each and every day, if I'm struggling, I know it was 5-fold, 10-fold, 20-fold, 100-fold for others involved, you know, that have weathered the storms. And I think that's where I say your standard has helped me, Doris, because we know we have to work twice as hard to get half as far, right? Our mistakes aren't just mistakes. Our mistakes feel like they are, the ground is shaking, like what's gonna happen? We have this overwhelming feeling of responsibility that if we mess up, they will deny opportunities that for the next generation that looks like us. And that's why, you know, you are so great at your craft, because you know, we've had to be on point with each and everything that we do, how we maneuver in these spaces. So my experience has both been, you know, subtle because of the amazing women that have made things easier for me, but it's also weirdly overt in spaces where first Black woman to host a national radio show, right? Where I was so excited to get this opportunity. I was immediately, reminded of how much work we have to do to get the representation in the spaces that matter most. Mm-hmm. And the hardest thing for me, you know, and I always tell people, like, as women, we oftentimes, and this is just how we are conditioned, unfortunately, but we emerge out of that confidently, have imposter syndrome kind of at times, meaning like we get in the chair and it's like, why do the questions that come to our head say, why me? You know, like, why did they pick me? Or like questioning our voice, not knowing that our credentials stand for everything like that we have gotten there. And we know that the standards in which we operate, we're largely overqualified, because it takes, you know, as Ibtihaj said, I believe, being exceptional for us to even get an opportunity. And so that's sort of what provides my confidence each and every day as I not only work on the broadcast, seeing the women that have paved the way for me, but also on the hardwood. And it's not easy to deal with, especially like, I think embracing what makes society, the hard parts of society, embracing that as an opportunity to continue to demonstrate that like my voice matters, raise my game so that they can't have evidence of anything else. And now you have to honor that, right? Like it just is that inner challenge where I sit down and I always tell people, like, unfortunately in our business, they see me before they hear me. They see us before they hear us. And C comes with judgments and preconceived notions and a woman, a Black woman, or whatever the case is. But once we start speaking, and that's where bringing up Vice President Kamala, I'm speaking, hold on, I'm speaking.
Yes.
Once we start speaking, the energy shifts, because now you're starting to see what our journey has got us to, and that is largely overqualified for what we are at currently. And so it's been like, you know, I just probably in 2020 got comfortable with like looking at my mentions and just dropping them and like moving about my day. But it has been a journey, and I definitely, the funny thing is, it's women that I look to that like, I'm like, you get it. And it's like, girl, like we on to bigger and better things, women that have helped me throughout all this. Yeah.
And Ibtihaj makes a great point. It's just about it taking everybody to make change. I know in an interview Jeff Van Gundy had done, the story was, you know, sort of the new role. And he told this story of men saying to him about me sitting in the analyst chair, you know, whatever they had to say. And he said, you know, they're trying to build me up, but really what they were trying to do is pull the other one down. And it's like, he stood in and said, no, you know, she's earned the right. So it takes everybody. Jayne, and then Hilary, and then Ibtihaj. I cannot wait. I can't imagine the stories here. So go ahead.
I mean, I think the two main points that I would want to put forward are representation and the language of feeling grateful. And I think that's definitely a change of, you see, you know, for me, like being a mom, I got my 3-year-old to watch the Stanford game last night because I told her Cameron Brink's hair looked like Elsa. And finally she watched, and I was like, cool, I'm getting my daughter to watch a woman play a sport, and that's what I want. I want my son to watch, you know, women playing sports. For me, having that representation is so important for teaching the next generation that's coming up. And then the second point would be starting to change the narrative of female athletes, of kind of that thought process you were saying of like, oh, I'm so grateful I finally have my seat, or I finally have the attention, versus no, what I've worked so hard to get to is validated. And like Shanae said, is actually probably even further along. And so us kind of internally and externally changing that language of thank you so much for having me. It's like, no, I deserve to have a seat at this table and should probably be leading the meeting, but it's okay. You'll get there. I know I'm there. And I think that's only kind of further promote, right? Of it's okay. You'll get there. We know where we are, and just follow along and you'll be in the right spot.
Yeah. So I hope to get back to the motherhood piece of that, because, you know, fascinating development with the WNBA collective bargaining agreement. Hilary or Ibtihaj, anything to add on that sentiment, sort of about whether there's been this subtle or overt objection to your presence in spaces, and then how did you handle those moments?
For me in my sport, I actually train with the guys. We never compete together, obviously, but I train with men. And it has helped me like accelerate, I think, my career and just training with them. Like I trained with guys and my sister, but you feel like the pushback, especially like when you're winning, just in practice, right? They can't take a loss. But for us in our sport, you even see it within competition. Offense a very subjective weapon in that it's up to the official to call every single action. So you do see sometimes the athletes who are a bit more, I don't even know like the correct terminology to use, but ones that could be a bit softer to the male officials, or like wear, you know, their uniform a bit tighter, or be willing to listen to their misogynistic jokes and things like that, maybe given more points or a bit more lenient with calls. And also I've had officials who will try to sit and officiate your match, or, you know, like lean against the partition behind them, just so they can physically show their disinterest that they were assigned to the women's matches versus the men's matches. So,
and what are you doing at that point?
What are you doing? I mean, you have officials who will yell at you if you question a call that they've made, really just to kind of assert their masculinity or their power over you. And, you know, I've always felt like the things that are meant for me will never miss me. Maybe that's faith-based. Maybe I'm always thinking about God. I don't know. But I'm like, you're not going to disrespect me. That's not what we're going to do. So if I'm going back and forth with an official, sometimes that's just the way it's going to have to go. Because honestly, you kind of have to show them that you're not afraid and that you are confident in your knowledge of the sport and in your actions, that you are deserving of points. And I found that having that attitude, having that mindset rather, in the way that I kind of show up for myself in competition has definitely helped me gain the respect that I'm deserving as one of the top athletes in the country, or sorry, in the world when I'm competing.
Sounds like you reacted with great equanimity, and I'm not sure I would have done the same. God bless you. Hilary, please.
Yeah, I mean, we said it, right? We're exceptional, and we know that. And I think it comes with building or having a platform, having an opportunity. And a lot of times for ice hockey, I think more recently, you know, we hear for many years, you're not fast enough, you're not physical enough, you're not like the guys, you're women's hockey, you're not hockey, right? And when we have opportunities such as the NHL All-Star skills competition, where we're all on the same platform competing. And I think what really recently turned the tides for hockey specifically in those conversations was when Kendall Coyne had her fast lap. And it's silly because it's an NHL All-Star skills competition. It really shouldn't matter, but we got on the stopwatch, and the guys and whoever else is watching that says, oh, you know, women's hockey isn't fast enough. They see Kendall flying around in that lap, and they're looking, they're like, oh my gosh, you know, she's with the guys. Like, she's there. we know that, right? But nobody else does. So when we have these opportunities, it feels like our gender's on the line, but that's why it's so important to provide visibility and to continue this conversation and continue to have the appropriate representation for not only the grassroots development, but for all of these fans who are just missing out on a phenomenal product.
So I'm curious how significant, and Chene, you may have been the one who touched on this, is because I know in the course of my career, having members of the distaff side that I could go to just to have them be a sounding board or ask advice to was absolutely critical. You know, how significant is women, are women, you know, in support of each other, and how do we move this forward? How do we change? Because these are deep cultural things that we're up against, right? These are attitudinal shifts that must occur across society, and that tends to move at a glacial pace. So Jayne, I'll start with you, because I am guilty of that imposter syndrome. I am guilty of having said a million times, I'm so thankful for the opportunities, as opposed to, no, it probably took me too damn long to get where I was. I bounce back and forth depending on my level of insecurity on that particular day. But I'm curious, you know, Jayne, how significant is it that we support one another, and how do we move this whole thing forward for all of us?
Yeah, I mean, our PA staff always goes back to rising tide lifts all boats. Mm-hmm. And, you know, in our last CBA negotiations agreement, we felt like we were doing that and pushing other PA leagues when they come to their CBA agreements to kind of rise with us as we were pushing for maternity, pay. I mean, you name it. We were pushing on every single possible, hotel rooms, plane tickets. I mean, Chene was on all the calls as well. I mean, we just pushed, and it is so important for us as female sports to build off of those blocks and be like, well, they've got this, so we want to go 15% higher than that, right? So then the next time that we come to negotiate, we're going 30% above what we're at. So using each other to kind of leverage for what we deserve and what's there, I think is really the W players' kind of biggest win in terms of promoting women's sports and being at the professional level that they deserve.
Before I let you get off that topic, I do think that is a significant thing, is how much ground you tried to chew up as it relates to motherhood and the implications for women in sport who are going through that stage of life. You know, this is something that society has to address at large, but, you know, how significant a win was that, and how much do you think that could change?
I always go back to the question of how many players have we lost because we didn't have this in place? And when I answer that question, I know it includes myself, right? I always wanted a big family, so I chose between using my body for my career or using my body to grow humans, and did 7 years in the league, and then said, okay, then I gotta go start having babies if I want. And there wasn't a provision that included now 100% maternity leave pay and childcare stipends and family planning financial support. It's huge. And the fact that it was recognized by our players how big of a part of our CBA this needed to be, and that it should have already been a part of the conversation. You know, the players chose what they wanted to list their priorities as, and this was at the top because they were tired of losing players that had to come to the decision of, am I gonna stop playing and, you know, producing the great career, or am I gonna go have a family? And they wanted to have that opportunity there. And now you see we have moms who are coming out and killing it. I mean, Dearica Hamby just had a baby and came back and then was 6th Woman of the Year. I mean,
y'all, let me just break some in here. If you have a baby and you come and play, don't guard them. Like, they dealt with childbirth. Like, it is wild, the strength. Like, people play better. Duana Bonner had twins.
Right.
It came back, problem. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm sad that it took so long to put it in, but I'm glad that it is there now. And I'm hoping that other professional athletes, professional female athletes and male athletes will have a parenting provision in their CBA where they're allowed time to go and have a family and continue to play.
Yeah, it's a monumental issue, and it's outside of sports, it's inside of sports, and just, you know, congratulations, because it was a great victory. Jayne, I'm just going to have you respond again to sort of this community that we have to have and how we do help one another. How significant is it?
It's everything. Solidarity is everything. And I think that we are the WNBA, the only sports league to be viable 25 years straight. We're about to celebrate our 25th anniversary this season. And while fencing or hockey or any, NWSL, is trying to get to that point, like we are extremely glad to be that league. And it takes assistance, but at the same time, we're at the point where we know that we can stand alone because we're standing together. The difference before was that a lot of these women that were in these positions of excellence, the league started in 1997, and it was like, wow, this is brand new, this is great. But like, we didn't have the collective notion of like, wow, we're up against a lot when it comes to our business, the comparisons, just even like, we talk about the CBA, a lot of our deals were league partner deals, right? Like, so the NBA has it, we have it. Well, we're a league full of women, so shouldn't we have other deals too? Like a whole nother world, half of the world open. And so it was just basically realizing that like we've been on these paths and journeys on our own, trying to figure out viability. How do we command attention so that we can make our points clear? And we did it through solidarity. A great example of this is, two examples, the EC. So as Jayne knows, the executive committee for the CBA, we ratified a year and 2 months ago. I mean, this is a badass collective. Sorry, I don't know if we're on Disney Zoom, Doris, or if this is NBA Zoom where we can curse and they put the buzzer on, whatever. It's a collective.
I should always be on that second or two delay, given my
right. You and me both. As a collective, like this executive committee was diverse and it represented all types of WNBA players. Like walking into the room, you have Elena Deladon coming off of her MVP season, my sister as president, who's been an MVP and a star on the Sparks. Obviously, Laysia Clarendon, who's at the forefront of advocating a lot for gender conversations and, leading the charge there. You have Sue Bird, the legend, right? Myself, the fire starter that would go and talk about our pieces on TV. Like, oh, if we need the public to know this, I'm gonna talk about it. All right, I got you. We had Carolyn Swartz, whose family literally was on Capitol Hill in the mix of what, like, all right, like minimum wage benefits for workers, how do we translate that to our CBA? And Elizabeth Williams, who, was in the middle of an ownership change right now this past summer with the Atlanta Dream, that like literally is probably one of the most quiet humans, but like just found her voice in such a huge way that had been that, I think she's the oldest, the longest tenured Atlanta Dream member, and she's like 25 years old, 26 years old. It's crazy. And so we had a lot of players in different places on the spectrum, top players, role players, vets, rookies, young players, all that type of stuff. So everyone was represented. But one thing I realize is that energy shifts when we all walk in the room together, And so that's sort of what set the standard for us, like our union and our support staff, Jayne included, like would fight for our schedules so that we could be together in front of our partners, because we knew that maybe if it's one person available, they could feel like, we were outnumbered, but if we're all together, then they can't deny us and on top of it, we had to know the numbers better than them. Like we have points in the CBA where we're like, we have to know these numbers, because when they say, is that possible? We're like, here's a spreadsheet. Like, yes, it is. And so it was a long process. And I think that mold is exactly what carried us through one of the hardest seasons, if not the hardest season, the 2020 WNBA season, where a lot of players did not want to play. But we knew that we had a platform, and we knew that we had an opportunity with visibility to not only show people the game at the highest level, but also advocate for others. And so that carried over in solidarity, where we may not as women not all agree, but guess what? As women, we understand the bigger picture, because that's just inherently who we are in our households, in our communities. And so, as we deal with these trials and tribulations. And the best thing about it is like, we did that CBA, which I don't know why Jayne was lying. She's like, oh yeah, this is great. We were nervous because we're like, did we push hard enough? Did we push hard enough? I remember this was the night before going on Good Morning America with my sister, with Robin Roberts. And we're like staying up at night, like, shoot, like, is this good? Like, are people going to be happy? And the groundswell of support was really great just because we knew that we were fighting for something bigger than all of us. And that has been in our DNA as women. And now we've seen the power of the collective. So like when that happened, getting tweets from Hilary was lit. Like, yeah, girl, like, cause we knew that she was in the fight right there with us. And anytime something good happens to women's sports, Hilary's the first to be like, give me the blueprint, give me the receipt. You know, so knowing that it's not just us, Sue Bird, obviously Megan Rapinoe, like Megan's out here like on the, like Sue's on the phone like, hey, like Megan's saying this is what they're doing.
Right.
So it's all of us in there together that made it special.
Representation, negotiating from positions of strength and knowledge, all significant and important pieces. Ibtihaj and Hilary, if you want to respond to that sort of notion, we're only a couple of minutes away, so if you prefer to go somewhere else or to touch on sort of that solidarity, I leave it to both of you to go where you wish here in the final couple of minutes. Hilary, I'll start with you. You're on mute, just so you know. I can see it in the window there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I think the solidarity, I mean, that's what's going to get us over a finish line, or the next finish line, right? And, you know, I learned firsthand, obviously you watch other amazing women do it, and you're like, how do we do that in our sport? How do we do that in our small world? Because you know that impact that you have is just going to be a groundswell in other ways. So, you know, we learned firsthand for Equitable Support Battle in 2017 and putting up a front saying, we're not going to our world championships, just the biggest tournament of the year, until we get equitable support. And these are our things. And we've never had maternity leave in our contracts at all. So adding that in, you know, there's all sorts of things that go into it. But a lot of it was just educating people and making sure that we had everybody standing up from a collection of players, that we felt like a unified voice. And, you know, I think it was said before that we were standing for something bigger than ourselves. And I think that's what really got a good push, and it established a new starting line for us, which was great. But the goal is to impact other industries as well. And that's, I mean, that's what the WNBA does to us, the NWSL. I mean, we all kind of feed off of one another. So one person moving it forward is a whole army behind her.
Yeah, it gives you a little bit more intrepid spirit. And Ibtihaj, I'll give you the final word here.
Oh my gosh, the pressure from Doris herself. You know, when Chiney was talking earlier, just the legacy, you know, this, did you say 25-year legacy with the NBA? Yeah. Yeah. I remember like my mom taking me and my sisters to WNBA games as a kid. We would catch the train from New Jersey right to Madison Square Garden, and I would go watch the Liberty play. And I actually found my Rebecca Lobo jersey, my signed jersey. So what I think is so cool about this moment that we're in is that, like, for me, I feel like it's come full circle. Seeing those women play a professional sport and be really good at what they did, I feel like allowed me to unconsciously grasp my aspirations as a young athlete myself and really kind of lean into my athletic ability. And what I love about just the power of the social justice movement that, to be honest, is being led by Black women. It has touched so many of us in so many different ways. I love that we are seeing it pop up in soccer, in hockey. Probably would never hear about it popping up in fencing, but we'll get there. And I don't know. I don't know if my glass is just half full in this moment, but I really believe in just the power of us, like, uniting under, you know, our fight for racial justice and just equity for all of us.
We have to keep showing up, ladies. And I'm going to just tell you this as somebody who's on the back nine of her career. I mean this sincerely, Chiney, Jayne, Hilary, Ibtihaj. Like, I know we are in exceptional hands with women like you, and we're getting emotional. So thank you. Thank you for your confidence, your presence, your fight, because it's going to take all of it. And I cannot thank you enough for spending some time. And I now get to throw it to another kick-ass woman who I have great admiration and respect for. She will take on all comers. It's the one and only Sarah Spain. Sarah?
Doris.
Yes, seriously. I love hearing you.
When do we get the Doris Burke jersey?
Yeah, honestly.
Don't make me cry. Sincerely, thanks. Sarah Spain, you're up, girl.
Okay, can we talk about how am I supposed to follow Doris Burke and that incredible panel and Doris crying? Oh my gosh, I just love it. And she's so right. It does bring tears to your eyes to look to that incredible panel and see some of the women that are leading the way. Also, equanimity. Okay, I love learning new words. My new word this week is ipsedexatism. So I'm going to put equanimity into my vocab as well. Thank you to that panel. I'm sure everybody learned a ton and just some great insight from those ladies. And I love the feeling of connecting across the different leagues and sports to come together in a sort of empowered movement. It makes such a difference. As she said, I'm Sarah Spain, Doris's colleague from ESPN. You can hear me on national radio podcast, Around the Horn, highly questionable writing for ESPNW. And I'm so thankful to be here. I was doing a panel actually out in San Francisco last year before the shutdown with the Warriors. So sad we're on Zoom, but so excited about the ladies that are here to speak today. I'm certain I'm going to learn a ton from this panel. It's called She Means Business, and it's about the influx of conversation around the business of women's sports. We're seeing, and we saw on that panel there, athletes are investors, athletes are spokespeople, athletes are owners of teams, founders of media companies, and we're seeing the sports business back women's sports and women's leagues in ways we've never seen before. Is this a massive pivot point? What can we do to make sure it doesn't dissipate? We're going to talk about all of that, where we go from here. And joining us today are some very powerful women from Wasserman, Lindsay Kagawa-Colas, from Togethxr, the Chief Content Officer, Jess Robertson, the Atlanta Dream, among many other things, Renee Montgomery, JPMorgan Chase Investment Specialist Managing Director, Angela Colombani, and of course, I'll be moderating. So ladies, so great to see all of you. And I love when I get a panel and it's almost all women that I already know and respect so much. And the new ones just means I have new people to get to know. I don't want to take too much time with the intros because there's so many questions and interesting things to get to. So let's start a little bit quickly and efficiently with a little context for who you are, how you became who you are, and what made you the person and the professional businesswoman you are today. Renee, let's start with you up in that left-hand corner on my screen.
Okay, so I'm Renee Montgomery. What made me who I am? Is that the question? We're skipping
Just, yeah, a little context for who you are, what you do, and how you got there.
Okay, so I played 11 years in the WNBA, recently retired, now co-owner and vice president of the Atlanta Dream. I think what makes me who I am is kind of everywhere I've been. Grew up in West Virginia, so that's a whole different type of lifestyle. Like just shot out of a cannon into the UConn media world when it came to college, and then just been going overseas. WNBA players, we go overseas every year, so just seeing those different cultures and the European cultures and how they act, how they move internationally, I think all of those things make me who I am.
Excellent. Jess, how about you?
Like West Virginia, I come from a small town in Kentucky, so I know that small town world. I had big ambitions to leave, and I always wanted to tell stories. I mean, that's as simple as that. I thought I would work at a record label. My first passion was music. I wanted to work in A&R, find great artists and bring them to the world and tell stories behind them and their work. I realized it's a very crowded space, but also my passion was words, not so much music itself. So I leaned into music journalism. My first job out of college was at Rolling Stone. I was convinced that I had peaked at 21, and I was like, what am I going to do with my life? But from there, I've built various consumer-facing media sub-brands at places like Rolling Stone, AOL, and TV. I was editor at the Fader for a while. And then when the Players Tribune launched, I remember reading an article by Michael Carter Williams about whether or not the 76ers were tanking. Well, intimate and disruptive. And I wanted to. So I was head of content for 5 years, and now we just launched Togethxr. I'm chief content officer of Togethxr, a new media company founded by Alex Morgan, Sue Bird, Chloe Kim, and Simone Manuel, which centers women, and I love that.
Very exciting. I bet you've seen Almost Famous like 100 times, based on you might have peaked at Rolling Stone at age 21. It's just a guess.
It was my life.
Yeah. Lindsay, first of all, behind the scenes, Lindsay was on my radio show last night, and I basically told her that I'm obsessed with her after that interview, and that I was going to force her to come on my pod and be my best friend. And I was like, oh, and by the way, you're also on my panel tomorrow. So I'm immediately putting the stalking into great effect. Lindsay, tell everyone about you. Oh, I think you're on mute though.
Well, that's a good start to me saying that the interview is only 10 minutes, so we'll see how this goes and regroup, okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
So what makes me, I think, hi, it's good to see everybody too. Hi, Jess. Hey, Renee. Hey, everybody. So I grew up in the Bay Area. My parents are actually diehard Warrior fans. Fun fact. My dad was a high school basketball coach in the Bay Area for 35 years. My parents met at Berkeley High. They were high school sweethearts. He was the point guard on the basketball team from sort of a golden era of Bay Area basketball. So basketball was always very much my roots, though I ended up playing volleyball later. As a collegiate athlete, my dad was a high school counselor and my mom was in sales. So I guess when you combine that with being a coach's kid, somehow you spit out an agent. And, you know, family was always very centered. Sport was always very centered. Academics was centered. I'd like to think that perhaps my first experience becoming an agent was choosing to play on club teams next to people who were going to the college I wanted to go to. So at least I knew how to align with greatness, even if I wasn't going to be the best one. So went to Stanford, played volleyball there, spent my master's learning about business, really through the lens of organizing movements and service, thinking I was going to become a philanthropic advisor for athletes. Actually, and it was through an informational interview coming out of a fellowship that I had won at the East Bay Community Foundation, Frank Ogawa Plaza, downtown Oakland, more Bay Area, lived by the lake, don't anymore. But through that fellowship, I was actually studying athlete philanthropy. And so I did a informational interview with an NBA agent, Bill Duffy, who's a local legend. And that's where I started cultivating a practice of representing athletes. Originally, he hired me as his executive assistant. So started there and started actually representing women after having managed some of the male stars and really fell in love with it. And so from BDA, moved on to Wasserman to join our women's sports, now called Talent in the Collective practice there. And since then have just been really focused on representing athletes who stand very squarely at the intersection of social justice and business, and who are real athlete activists and leaders in conversation.
Yeah, just started that agent career with a little old player you might have heard of named Diana Taurasi. No big
I
deal.
did.
Start out with the best. I'm so glad, Angela, that it looks like we got your actual self and not just your essence, although I was excited to talk to a spiritual ghost, something from the ether, but appreciate that the camera's now working out. Tell people a little bit about what you do and how you got there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me join this wonderful panel of amazing women today. So my backstory is I grew up in a really small town in rural Northern California where there was a huge focus on athletics more so than academics. But what was great about that is I was taught to work hard, not quit, be competitive. I then went to school where I played college basketball at Division II. I studied biology and chemistry, so nothing financial services related. But decided after college I didn't want to pursue that path and wanted to follow my big sister and live in the big city of San Francisco, which I did, and became an assistant to an assistant in financial services, which is literally the bottom rung of the corporate ladder, which was a really great experience. Took a few, but I knew very quickly that that was not for me. And took a few lateral jobs after that as I was learning the space, building a network, and finally found a career at JPMorgan where through my personal network that I built, I was offered a really great stepping stone career, which I took. And then a couple years later, in my mid-20s, I left to coach high school basketball. And then left that, went back to finance in New York, came back out to Northern California to help build out the private bank. And my role today is I'm an investment specialist for ultra high net worth individuals. I help them build portfolios in the context of their goals and their balance sheet. And I also lead a team of advisors that focus on healthcare entrepreneurs, founders, and investors.
So I have to follow up with that because we're always at ESPNW talking about the EW statistic that 94% of women in the C-suite played sports at one point. We always talk about the translating leadership skills. So how did the basketball coaching then come into play in the financial sector?
Well, you know, that story and that role in my life was really powerful for growth. I have to say, I was 26. I was pretty naive when I took the job. I thought, oh, you know, I'm just going to go in there and it was high school. High school Division I. They just moved to the highest level in Northern California. The team, they needed a varsity coach. They gave me the job, and I thought, oh, I'll just go in there and teach them the plays, make them work hard, and play the best players. And that's all there is to it, which, as we all know, that couldn't be anything farther from the truth. You have to be a mentor, a coach, a parent, a disciplinarian, but like with compassion. You have to learn how to communicate with people that have a different way of communicating than you do. You have to listen. I mean, if we all know teenagers, you know that they are not afraid to give feedback. And we weren't good. And we played, I believe one of the former state champions was in our league, and we just got moved up. And I wasn't used to losing in my career, and we lost some games by over 40 points.
Oh boy.
So it was humbling. You know, not quitting. None of the girls on my team quit, which was a highlight. We beat a team in our league that was one of the top teams. One of the best moments of my life. But you know, you have to have perseverance. You have to work really hard because you never know when your moment's going to change. And that's the same thing in when you're an executive or you're in a leadership role or you're in financial services. I think a lot of it is just not giving up and staying with it to get your chance, so that when you get your chance, you're there to capitalize on it.
Yeah, that story, I think, for a lot of women across different industries, right? Getting that door open and then being prepared and ready to walk through it. Let's talk about the differences in men's and women's sports, especially in terms of the business opportunities. Lindsay, you talked about how you started out managing some men's players. There are massive dollar signs in and around every men's sport for the most part. What made you look at the women's side and say, this is where I want to be? You might be on mute again. I'm starting to worry about you're taking the agent thing where like you do the work but do it quietly thing a little too seriously.
I mean, clearly, right? You know, those who can't teach, or is that what something like that? You know, I think in representing women, it wasn't necessarily specializing. It wasn't the intentional choice to begin with. The choice to begin with was, this looks really interesting. And really, it was just an application of this radical idea that the women deserve the same representation and the same service as the men. So it didn't start out as, you know, a movement. It didn't start out as, hey, I'm going to unlock all of this change. It was, Diana Taurasi deserves to have the best representation available, and she deserves to have someone fighting for her. Because women deserve to be powerful, and businesses and society thrive when they are. We know that now, but that was not quite so obvious then. And so it was really around building a practice there and coming to understand that there was an ability to create what didn't exist, and that representing women in sports was really this perfect intersection of social justice and business. And it's where I really enjoyed being the most. And you could be really creative, and it was a hard fight, but you were fighting hard for people who you believed in, who were the heroes you think everyone should be looking for. And I think we're starting to see more of that now. But, you know, and I said this yesterday, I say this all the time, that as an agent, if I'm not hearing no, I didn't ask for enough. And I've heard no a lot. I heard no a lot more back then, but it's starting to build some momentum into yes.
it is sort of flabbergasting how the lens through which people have viewed women's sports and female athletes has been this idea of underperforming or not worthy, when in fact it should absolutely be seen as a place for massive growth. A little bit of investment and look what you can do, because without much investment at all, they're already breaking through every single idea of what they can do. So actually investing feels like the obvious choice, which is what we do across all other businesses. And somehow we look at it differently when it's happening in women's sports. Jess, what do you think as you're sort of approaching this, especially from a brand new point of view with Togethxr?
I think as a journalist by trade, originally, I'm taught to go where the quiet is, where the silence is. And for a company like Togethxr, or even some of the stories that, you know, I was so proud to tell at a place like the Players Tribune, it's a content desert in women's sports. I mean, it's, you know, I know there's 44% participations by women athletes, but 4% of the media coverage. We know the stats. I believe in the power of visibility, but more importantly, I believe in the power of a story. And for our brand, and I think for any brand really, if you tell a story that taps into your IQ, that makes you think, that shifts your perspective on something, if you tell a story that taps into your EQ, that makes you feel, then you've suddenly connected. And the power of that connection and dimensionalizing and humanizing that can be done if you consciously choose to invest in those stories, in our case, with women athletes, you have radical power. And you know, it's also getting to a point where I don't want to wait for someone else to tell those stories. They're there. There's like, you know, so much that hasn't been told over many generations. So one, it's a great way to, again, representation, visibility is critical. It's also just good business. And we talk about like the growth and investment in women's sports, and I feel like we've been on the precipice many times over of it really breaking through. But something about right now feels different and optimistic and hopeful, because I think culture's finally caught up. And the conversations that we're having, the stories that we're telling together, the conversations that we're having around women's sports are also happening in culture at large. And I think now is the right time.
Yeah, I think, while not apples to apples, the Me Too movement unearthed in a lot of people the desire to have conversations and to disrupt what we've always just sort of accepted. And it is true that women's sports are battling not only the sports landscape, but centuries of misogynistic expectations and stereotypes about the spaces that women belong in. There's so many examples in sport too of the things that we get told stories about and then care about, from the Little League World Series, where men will always say, women's sports aren't high enough level. Okay, but we'll watch 12-year-olds if you tell us a good story about it. Or curling, or any other Olympic sport that we don't even know the rules to, but tell us a great story about how they got there, and we're in. And if we do that with women's sports, people are interested. We just have to keep doing it. Renee, this week there was an interesting conversation going on social media with Draymond Green, who we all were excited to have on board, but also wanted to encourage to do the work, to understand the stories being told, the people doing the work, the stuff that's already been said and done in pursuit of elevating women's voices. What was your reaction to that conversation, and how did it make you feel, especially as someone who, I think both frustratingly and remarkably, in the last year, you stopped playing and all of a sudden your voice got elevated? Instead of us focusing on your greatness as a player, it took you stepping away for us to listen.
Yeah, no, when I first saw it, my first thought is to think, all right, what is that person's intention? Because sometimes people are just not good at articulating themselves, and it's just like, all right, maybe I can see, like, I like to always see where the person is coming from. And so with Draymond, you always have to really see where he's coming from, because, you know, he says bold statements quite often. I mean, this is coming off of a statement of him saying that he himself is the greatest defensive player ever. So you know that he's not shy about saying something controversial. And so I want to say, like, the intention was great, but to your point, Sarah, like, people got to do the work. Like, if he was somebody that was calling the WNBA, asking how can he have his platform be used, working with WNBA players in any aspect and bringing them, if he was doing something, I might be like, okay, maybe he saw that. But just to kind of hop in the conversation because there's an NCAA game that's going on that's really loud right now, it was like he just wanted to add his opinion. And, you know, to that same point, everybody's allowed their opinion. But for me, I would like opinions of people that are doing the work. You know, if you're invested, if you want to be a part of what's really going on, the growth that we're already having, and to add some fuel to that, yeah, I want to hear from you. Like, I want to hear about it, but I don't want to just hear like hot takes just because.
Yeah. Lindsay, I was thinking, you know, you talked about having inclusion riders with some of your clients, and that's a concept a lot of us Googled after Frances McDormand said it in an awards speech, but the idea that you can actually create the spaces around you in your own vision by putting it in your contract. Perfect example. Hey, Draymond, next time you get asked to do a commercial, why don't you see if they'll put a WNBA player in it with you? Like, these ideas that we can bring into the spaces where people want to be allies, we just have to think differently, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's actually, when you have power, when you have ownership, when you have power, when you have agency, when you have leverage, it's actually not that hard to affect change. And it's also not that hard to ask for help doing it. And we have ideas. I literally have a Google Doc linked through my Instagram of explicit ideas, because it got to a point where a lot of people want to help, and we see this through all of these connected movements over the last few years, where intention, Renee, to your point, is fantastic, but impact, right, and action, like those things are different measurements. And if we're really going to be effective, I think we have to do a lot of listening. We have to do a lot of learning. WNBA players were fantastic, I think, examples of this in the way that they leaned into their relationships with movement leaders and took advice and had conversations before they moved as a group. And so that is a great model for all of us. And women are so good at that, at listening and going to the folks who have been doing the work and empowering the leaders who have been in these spaces. And so even with the inclusion rider, like, I called the professor who actually wrote it and asked her to tell me about it. I didn't write my own. We started with hers. Like, it's already done. Start with the experts. And so, you know, having people come to us and ask us, how can I help? There's no shortage of ideas. There are very specific ways to help, especially when you have over 1 million followers and are your own media channel and people listen when you talk. Come to us and we will tell you what to talk about.
I have a great example of an NFL player who's about to redo a deal with a major brand and is considering putting in his contract a requirement that that brand also provide an X number of shoes to a women's sports league that he's interested in getting involved in. That right there, that's how you make a difference, right?
You can do this at every level. And also, sorry, Sarah, it's not
just Curry do it with girls' shoes, right? We've seen him say, okay, this girl said she wanted to be able to play like with me, and he made the difference.
Yeah, but it's also systemic and goes beyond that, right? Like, think about the way that these partnerships activate, right? Are you agreeing to do a league partnership if they're not equally investing in the W, not just to the NBA, but how those dollars come to life through the W? Are you going to insist that that happen before you put your name on it? I mean, how much money do NBA guys need? I get it. Like, it's a measurement tool of success, but there's a way to use that power to actually make the world better. And by the way, you look really smart when you do it. We don't even need the credit. Like, you can have the credit. So, you know, there are large systemic issues that can be addressed with this. The NCAA, are you doing a commercial for the NCAA for a sponsor without ensuring that a woman is also reflected in that, or that the women's tournament is being equally invested in? If I'm an athlete with leverage, I'm asking those questions.
Yeah. Angela, do you find the same issues across equity between men and women in your industry?
Yes, I think if you just look at the representation and leadership, there's been a ton of change, and I mean, the person who runs Northern California is a woman, but I don't think that's enough, right? It's got to be. It shouldn't be such a big deal. Oh, there's a woman who runs this market and that market. It needs to be. Yeah, and then her executive team is all women, or it's diverse and women, and you know, so there's been a ton of change. We're really, really focused on it, and I felt it. I don't feel it today like I felt it, you know, when I first started. So that's good, but I agree with what everyone's saying, and you can just apply that to pretty much any industry. You can speak to things, but you have to really put your dollars there, and then you have to. So you can't just have one person, you have to have a whole group of people, and you have to commit to it. make it
And
change
one of the most
faster.
important things too is if you have the genuine belief that what you're doing is not just right, but also good business, it will change the way you approach it. And for far too many people, they don't get that the investment is a smart and good one. And so then it's like pulling teeth. And Jess, I keep calling you Jess. Is it Jessica? Can I say Jess? Would you have a preference?
Jessica.
I don't want to Naomi Osaka this. And okay. When you are looking at allies to create around this new brand, how important is it to really understand that they're valuable and meaningful allies and not empty partnerships?
It's critical for us for a number of reasons. We're a mission-based, value-based brand. We're also starting from scratch. So we want partners that come in that are genuinely and organically and endemically aligned with our mission and what it is that we're trying to do. It's also, I love the social conversations and the reckonings that we've had in the last year, but I think you can tell pretty easily, consumers can tell what's performative and what's genuine. And I love that brands are now wanting to show up for women, but there are layers to that and there are levels of that. For us, it's, are you going to be here after the Olympics? Are you going to be here after the Winter Olympics? Are you going to be here after the World Cup? Because this is not cyclical for us. This is every single day. Women's sports is not a cause. It's a good business. And we think really about disrupting the sort of vicious cycle that happens with visibility or lack of visibility. If you don't have enough visibility, then it's hard to grow viewership, fan base, community that then brands can come into and sell against and monetize. So it's for us, we want to disrupt that cycle. And we need brand partners or partners otherwise who believe in that disruption and who are in it for the long run. People will know. People will know if you're being performative.
Yeah, disruption is huge because if you look at last year, we shook up the entire sports schedule, and guess which two leagues outperformed expectations and outdid their ratings in every single year before that? The NWSL and the WNBA, because people had it in front of them. They knew when it was happening. It was presented to them in a way that they had to go looking for it, just like they were looking for men's, because men's was all different times of year and everything else, and everything went down, and what went up were the things that suddenly had a different kind of investment in them. Renee, I want to talk to you about that aspect of sort of being a part of something and understanding what's performative and what's intentional. As an owner of the Atlanta Dream, you're taking over a franchise where everyone is very happy to see you because of previous ownership and because of the travails that happened in not only flipping the Senate, but then flipping the ownership of that team. You are obviously partnered with more traditional sports team owners. How do you make your voice heard, and what do you anticipate your biggest role being at the team?
Yeah, well, before we even went into this endeavor, I already knew where they stood. So it's not a fight to have my voice heard. They have the same feeling I do. Sometimes we'll be in a meeting and Suzanne will be, she'll just ask outright, is this a Black-owned business? Is this a minority business? Is this a woman-owned business, woman-led? Like, she'll just say it. And so, sometimes for me, like, I was going to get to it, but she just outright says it. And so there's this partnership that is already being formed in a sense that people know, people are kind of already getting it from how we're moving already. And it's just about being intentional. We talk about those opportunities, and Jess, because we're allowed to call you that now. So Jess told us that, it's about visibility. And so that we think that matters. And for us to have a WNBA team in Atlanta, we need to be visible like the men. And we have a lot of markers too that we can hold companies accountable for. We have the Braves, we have the Hawks, we have the Falcons, and we have the Dream. So if you're a company and you're giving 6-figure plus deals to the Braves, the Hawks, the Falcons, but for the Dream, you don't have much money left over, you got to make that make sense now. Like we have to figure out, why don't you have any money, or when will you have some money? Because clearly you're invested in sports, but why aren't you invested in women's sports? And if it's oversight and maybe they don't want to be invested, then obviously we want to align our brands with brands that want to be invested in women's sports. But I don't think anybody's ever really pushed the issue. I think it was almost understood that, of course, we're going to donate. Let's still have our sponsorship with the Hawks. Of course, we're still going to do this. But when it came to the Dream, it was like, oh, okay, so what's the team looking like this year? And what kind of events do y'all have planned out? And it's like, I'm curious to we're a WNBA team, one of the 12. And so just kind of changing that whole narrative, and letting people know that we're here too, and we're investing in ourselves. So we're not just asking everyone to invest in our new vision. We're investing in ourselves as well. And so that's what's been most exciting for me, like with the ownership group, is just we all kind of feel the same. I wrote Suzanne an email and I'm like, okay, you know that we're at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to everything right now, sales, group partnerships, corporate sales, we're like at the bottom. And I was like, I feel like we should be ranked as maybe a number 16 seed because we're in March Madness. But I was like, I really feel like we're a number 1 seed that's like kind of a sleeper. Like that's how we have to feel. But I really feel that way. Like I know, yeah, like I feel like we're ready to make some noise. Not this season in a sense of we know that this is a long game, but I think that we understand that we're in Atlanta. And so that means something. We're in a city where there is a lot of money. There's a lot of money when it comes to minority-owned businesses, women-led businesses. Women are leading the way here in Atlanta, and you can just see it from our mayor. And so I think that alone, and just understanding that here in Atlanta, things are done a little different than the rest of the U.S. And so we're going to try to turn things up. You know, I don't think I'm fighting for my voice. I think that the others in my ownership group, and Suzanne and Larry, they're like right there with me yelling.
That's awesome. Lindsay, that makes me think of something, and I'm curious your take on it. In the past, there's been a lot of league-wide deals that go to the NBA, and then they write in the WNBA as part of it. That's a great thing because you have a built-in influence and power of the NBA pushing and putting sponsorship dollars in. But I've heard players like Sue Bird in the past say it's also a problem because you have a lot of brands that didn't select the WNBA. They are in there, but they're not invested, and it's not necessarily a space that they understand or are maximizing. How do you make sure that you also, you take advantage of that? You don't look a gift horse in the mouth, but you also know that there needs to be a really concerted effort to get the brands that want to be there and are going to market the right way.
Well, I think it starts with how they're being sold, right? So it starts in the room when the NBA is pitching or when someone's calling the NBA and wants to do business. Hey, Top Shot, cool, you have a license, but where are the women? And so, you're now valued in billions of dollars, maybe lost a little money like in the last couple of days, but are we requiring that you activate with women? Because you're going to find out that actually helps you make a lot of money. And so I think it starts with how that sales conversation is had, how many slides in your deck are dedicated to the WNBA and its value proposition, right? It needs to be sold and it needs to be packaged, and we can help. The collective think tank is a consortium that we launched at Wasserman. That's a consortium of a bunch of professors and research that is being done around the value of women's dollars and the value of the woman consumer and the value of the woman athlete. So the information is there. I think that it starts by looking at how those sales meetings are happening and who's doing the selling. So there's that. I can't say who was in the room. I can't say what the deck looked like. I can say what I would hope that it would look like, and I would hope that it would be equally selling both. And then I think there's layers to that. There's the buyers, there's the media buyers, there's the athletes who become the endorsers, who again, we've talked about, have the ability to influence how these activations come to life. I also think that the policies around how that money is allocated need to be examined, because if a brand is not going to activate with the WNBA should be able to sell that category. So if you are not actively in that space, do not block the WNBA from selling that category. And because there's money to be made, and that's a metric that the WNBA is held to. And so it's really unfair to set up the WNBA and say, hey, you're underperforming or sponsors don't want to activate, when, hey, maybe a sponsor and the decision maker is being informed by a particular kind of bias, fine. You don't need to do business here. We don't need to force it down anyone's throat, but it should be sold effectively. And if no one's buying it, fine. Leave the category for us to sell.
Yeah, the information coming out of the collective, I would imagine, is going to be huge, because there's such dated ideas that run a lot of what happens in the sports world, to the point of sometimes you'll only see the numbers for men 18 to 45. And then you also put that alongside the numbers that say who's actually got the purchasing power. And you're like,
right,
what are we doing here? You're missing out on this massive, change of the way business is being done, and you're being left behind, which is not how businesses normally operate. So the disruption aspect is missing in sports in a lot of ways, where people have such antiquated thinking. Just to the point of talking about actually understanding and caring about the people that are invested in what they're reading and watching. do you think it's important to address topics that together that are very specific to women's issues, whether that's maternity or sexual assault or, you know, balance? I hate that word, but I don't know a better one. All that stuff that we tend to talk about when we talk about women in sports.
I think it's important because you need to humanize those topics. They can feel very disparate. They can feel like policy. Sometimes we're actually talking about legislation. So to make that personal, the best way to do that is to tell a story about someone who's experienced that in a very human way, in a very thoughtful way. I think firsthand, one of the best examples of a great human story around a policy that actually impacted change. This actually wasn't with a female athlete, but it was with Danielle Carcillo at the Players Tribune around the treatment of players once they left the NHL and how they were taking care of their mental health, their physical health, and so on. And after he did his piece, which really humanized the subject of mental health, the PA and the league came back with radical insurance and lifelong opportunity changes for them as former players. I think we saw that happening with the CBA negotiations and the WNBA last year. I think you have to humanize these stories, but I also don't think you have to hit the same note every time you tell that story. There's also a way to center these women as powerful as they are. It's important to touch on these topics and these issues, but you can also tell the story in a way that just feels empowering and celebratory and not always serious, though it is very serious.
Yeah, you made me think about how frustrating it is that half the population has these issues and yet they still are always sort of seen as other because we make male the default in the ways we approach the workspace and everything else. Angela, you're a mom. Does it change the way you do your business at all or the way you advocate for clients in that relationship?
I think, you know, being a mom obviously just strengthens how you advocate for your clients because you advocate for your children all day long. You have to multitask more. I think it also makes you feel more powerful when you have children. It can. It's pretty incredible in the weight of raising tiny humans. It is quite a bit. So, you know, you shouldn't be in my business if you don't advocate for clients, you don't care about people because that's what it's all about. And then being a mom just means that I have different experiences now and I can relate to people in a different way. It's just another human experience that I've had.
Lindsay, you're a mom too. And I know with your clients, you've really embraced from the very beginning that they're a whole person and not just an athlete. And it feels like in women's sports, we are leaning in to progressive ideas, to political opinions, to honesty about everything from miscarriages to sexuality. You know, I mean, every part of ourselves has been open and for those who choose. How do you navigate that with your clients, those who want to be open, those who would rather be more one-dimensional or private, or any of those issues that are more hot button in the world?
Yeah, well, I don't think no woman is one-dimensional, that's for sure. I mean, certainly no person. I think that, you know, what you choose to talk about and what you want to lean into, that may even just evolve as you become more comfortable, you become more connected, right? Maybe, you know, I remember Brianna Stewart talking, you know, very early days about her Me Too story, and she was the first team sport athlete to join that conversation. And that was a conversation we had really early, and it was, hey, you should know about this. And then it was, let's decide how we want to tell that story. At some point I'm going to, but she wasn't quite ready. And it all comes down to a relationship, and it comes down to trust. And we talk a lot, you know, with our clients about what makes our role special. And it's really easy to represent someone when it's going really well. I think when it gets harder and when you get battle tested and when you prove your value is when things aren't going well. And that's where experience really counts, and that's where relationships really count, and that's what it all comes down to. So ultimately, I'm here to help my clients get what they want. And oftentimes that means going out and finding the right person to advise, but it all comes down to trust, and it all comes down to, you know, figuring out how to make someone's life better. You know, I think being a mom certainly helps me do that. It helps you think about the things that people might not be talking about. You know, we take a lot of pride in some of the deals that we've done with clients in and around, you know, women's wellness and fertility. And that's all driven by my own experience, having gone through multiple cycles of IVF to have our first kid. And that's a pretty unique perspective to have as an agent in a game like this. And I think that we're, you know, at a moment where there's more and more activity from brands who are thinking about women specifically. We don't have to twist people's arms to care. So it all comes down to the relationship and developing that trust so people can talk about the hard stuff.
Renee, we all kind of laugh sometimes when we look at the early days of marketing for the WNBA. We got all the players in halter tops sitting on cars. And, it just feels so strange now. But over the course of your career, even just at the time that you were in the league, did you feel a noticeable change in the league leaning into authenticity of who the players were, Black women, queer women, whatever, and whoever you are, representing your true self, and how that actually served the league?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it wasn't just the halter tops. It was more than that. It was just leaning into the fact that we have women that have better ink jobs than men. You know, like that was not even a thing that was highlighted, like women players that had a sleeve that might be, you know, unique and popping. That wasn't a thing that would have been highlighted because, again, halter tops. But then they started to understand that, okay, listen, I'm just saying, then people started to realize that, oh, wow, there's some extreme sneakerheads in the WNBA. I think that's where it started to really open up. And you saw an Epiphany Prince who has an Unreal collection, Simone Augustus who has an Unreal collection, Ty Young. You just start to see these different names start popping up at these sneakerheads. And we're like, duh, I've been known Moan had a good sneaker collection. I played with her. So I started to see, like, I can remember when I was drafted in 2009 to Minnesota. And then to when I went back to Minnesota in 2015, it was like it was two different places. And it wasn't just it was Minnesota, but it was just how the Minnesota organization was even branding Minnesota. It was just everything was different. And even for a marker for the WNBA in 2016, we wore the shirts that said "Change starts with us." The WNBA wasn't even having it back then. So it wasn't that the WNBA was progressive in 2016. No, the WNBA players were progressive in 2016. The WNBA caught up though, that's the good news. And they allowed the players to lead the conversation. And once the players started to lead the conversations, you started to see the marketing just made more sense. And people started to be more engaged. The storylines were told. People started to be more invested in the WNBA, and that crossover thing started to happen as well, where other women's sports was like, yeah, we were like, we see y'all, and they were like, we see you too. And then everybody started to just band together and be these powerful women that we already knew we all were. And so I can remember just even in the negotiations last season, and the stuff that the executive committee was talking about putting on the table as mandatory, you know, that's coming a long way, because in 2016 we were getting fined for something that was completely normal. This year everyone was wearing shirts. You know, we saw the Vote Warnock shirts. That was okay, but in 2016 we were getting fined for that. So for me, yeah, I could definitely see a shift. And then you can see what happens when the leagues allow players to take the lead.
Yeah, it's authenticity. It's about not having a fear of letting people represent themselves. And it's so important with this crowded marketplace of content. People are drawn to what's genuine and real more so than artifice, especially when it feels like it's not truly a representation. And in WNBA, it certainly didn't for a while there. We have so much more we could get to, but we are close to out of time. But I want to give you all one last chance. I'm going to ask you perhaps a challenging question. I'll give you a choice. You can either tell me a risk that you feel we need to take in spaces that we're in order to make an important change, or what you predict in some sort of future of women's sports over the next couple of years. Let's start with you, Jess.
Oh, okay. A risk. I look at decision makers. I look at layers of decision making. A risk that I think needs to be taken is CMOs, CEOs, decision makers at the top should evaluate who's in the room with them, who's not in the room with them. Take a look at themselves and the decisions that they've made and where they choose to invest, and maybe step aside and let someone come in with the right perspective, with a different perspective, with a new perspective, and make radical, disruptive decisions within their companies. There is no neutral anymore. We're not in a world of neutrality. There is sort of right and wrong here. So I I think decision makers need to look at themselves and their teams and make big changes.
Angela?
Can I just say what Jess said? Because I totally agree.
And
I
honestly,
totally agree.
I think disruption feels like a through line here. So I love that. Lindsay, how about you?
I think just building on that, because I completely agree, Jess should always go first. Always, like on everything. So thank you. For me, it's really about reframing how we even define risk. Like, what is the risk? Like, or is it really a bigger risk not to? Right? At this moment, that's how we see it. We see it as it's a bigger risk not to do the right thing. It's a bigger risk not to be on the right side. Like, this isn't about a black box. It's not about a yellow box. Like, this is about, if you don't go big right now, like, what are you doing? And I remember talking about like 10 years ago, wanting to see more diversity in advertising, right? Like today, maybe we take for granted the fact that we see mixed race couples, right? Or that we see Black women dominating the advertising at the front of Vogue, like for elite luxury brands. Maybe we're taking that for granted, but I just think there's more risk in not being bold right now. So I would say just fully redefining how we think about risk.
Yeah. Renee, how about you?
Well, after Lindsay is making me fully redefine, I had an answer that I was already planning, but I would say that.
Go back, Renee, go back.
No, but I'm going to say no, she's right, but it kind of plays into what I was going to say in a sense of the risk is to don't be afraid to ask for more. I think a lot of times when we're asking for anything, when it comes to women, or even if a woman, when it comes to getting a promotion, women will evaluate ourselves and we'll picture everything that's wrong with us. Like when we look in a photo, we look at everything wrong with us ourselves, and we're like, oh, this is a terrible photo. And everybody else is like, no, it's a good photo. But guys, they look at a photo, they look at everything great about themselves. They're like, oh yeah, you see that? I look good. Like guys just evaluate themselves completely different than we do. So I would say, one, women, we got to reevaluate ourselves. Like we got to stop doing what we're doing to ourselves, and we are what we think we are. And then I would say number two is just ask for more. I think we always think we're like, again, to what Lindsay said, if they didn't say no, you probably didn't ask for enough. Like I'm going to keep that nugget because we need to ask for more.
Yeah. You're making me think of all the messages from literally these boxing gloves say Untamed and we can do hard things, because that's how obsessed I am with Glennon Doyle's book Untamed, which is all about the way we see ourselves, the way we expect gratitude to be just being thankful and not asking for more. I'm obsessed with so many messages from that book. I'm co-owner of a soccer team, so I'm doing the risk, I'm putting in the work, and I'm believing in the things that I'm saying, which is, I think it's an incredible investment opportunity. And I agree with you, Lindsay, people are going to be left behind. It is not a risk. It is actually just wise business. And until people get that, they're going to be watching me and Renee up in the owner's suites, just getting it done, and that they have been smart enough to do it too. That was fantastic. I want to talk to you forever, but I'm not allowed to. I'm getting text messages like, hey, we're past time. So thank you all so much for your incredible insight. I'm now going to stalk Jess too. Angela, I love making new friends that I can pick their brain for intelligence. This is actually the end of the whole PlaymakeHER event. Presented by Chase. So thank you to Chase for the sponsorship and for hosting this event. And thanks to all the speakers, these ladies and the ladies that came before. I've learned a ton, and I'm going to start saying equanimity in addition to Togethxr. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. And thanks to the Warriors too for having us.
Thank you guys.
Thanks everybody.